Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to episode 95 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is Ryan King, the writer of Cricketsong, currently on Kickstarter. I spoke with Ryan about his journey on this book, collaboration with artist Daryl Toh, experience with Kickstarter, and starting out in comics. Cricketsong is a blend of genres, playing in the same realm as movies like From Dusk Till Dawn and The Hitcher. I've backed this project myself, and I encourage you to do the same. Ryan can be found online at his official website, RyanKingWrites.com, and on Twitter and Instagram as @Ryan_King. That's with 3 Y's in Ryan and 3 I's in King. In other news, I fully recognize that I have neglected Funny Book Splatter in recent months. I'm working to get back on a more regular schedule, so if you're a horror comics creator and you want to chat about your book, please reach out to me through email at james@horrordna.com or on Twitter at @jamesferguson. Alright, without further ado, let's dig into episode 95 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Ryan King. Alright, so to kick us off, how would you describe Cricketsong if you had to pitch it to somebody on the street or the convention floor or what have you?
Yeah, Cricketsong is a bit of a genre blender comic. I like to describe it as a crime thriller set in the Southern California desert about 2 traveling strangers. They're crossing the Mexico border into the U.S. One of them, Emil, is a 20-something. He's actually going to Burning Man. He's on his way over there, and he teams up with another traveling stranger to him. This is Barry, who's about middle-aged gentleman, and he's a smuggler of sorts. And it's a bit of a crime thriller with horror elements, a lot of mystery going into it on both sides of the characters. And yeah, it's kind of a sun-drenched terror in the same vein as Breaking Bad, The Hitcher from the 80s, as well as those lovely road narratives like On the Road, as well as Into the Wild.
It's kind of an odd mix of things between On the Road and something like The Hitcher, but
yes,
it's an interesting combination.
I've always wanted to do something kind of a homage to those road narratives out there, and I feel like, you know, other than what, like, say Duel or The Hitcher, where it's one person against another, you know, I kind of wanted to see what I could possibly bring to the table. So I'm looking forward to what people get out of this one.
Yeah, it's funny. There's no small amount of horror comics to remind me never to go outside. It's usually it's like don't go into the woods, which I'm like pretty firmly like, yep, got it. Camping, not interested in. But this is like, you know, don't go to Burning Man or whatever. I'm like, yeah, got it. Like I could probably cross that off the list. Like just seeing the way the desert sprawls out there for as far as the eye can see is enough to be like, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. I should probably avoid that.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me, I was looking at Alamo Drafthouse's, their latest picks at the theater, and I saw a movie called Crawl Space, and it's about like a guy, I guess, hiding in a crawl space in like a sorority or some apartment building or something, just slowly stalking and picking off people. So you're not even safe in your own home anymore.
I heard a great podcast about that. I think it was on Criminal, where there was like a guy who was just like flat out living in someone's attic, and like every so often they would like hear a noise, or like they'd come home and like something was like out of place, and then they found out there was a guy living up there for like months. And I'm like,
oh yeah, that just gives
God damn, that's creepy. Like it's
willies.
Just
exactly.
Like forget about that. Like all right, he's gonna look at you or something like that. But like there is someone that does not belong there living in your house, and you have no idea.
Yeah, that's isn't that one of like the first episodes of X-Files too? It's there's a lot of horror that spins off of that theme. It's eerie as fuck.
Yeah, it's pretty like I feel like a simple concept with that, but yeah, like that home invasion, not even home invasion. Well, I mean it is a home invasion, but that kind of like idea of like this is not natural certainly plays with it.
Yeah.
But I guess what drew you to something like Cricketsong? So this isn't the first time you're collaborating with artist Daryl. Is it Daryl Toh? Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, Daryl Toh. He's from Malaysia. Well, actually, you know, I've never actually spoken to him in person, so I guess I should ask him. Is this how you pronounce his name? But you know, everybody at conventions go, "Oh, Daryl Toh. I know Daryl Toh." And yeah, so it seems like we're all in unison on how to pronounce his name. But yeah, I've worked with him in the past on 2 other previous comics. The first one was a small 16-pager. It's a black and white kind of horror ghost story that started us off. Everyone could read it over at the Study Group Comics website. It's available for free. It's called The Games We Played. And that's kind of what kickstarted our collaboration. That's a bit of a pun. We didn't actually launch it on Crickstarter. I just went ahead and wrote the script, commissioned Daryl to complete the art, and then we just threw it up online for free, and we got a lot of good traction. And that collaboration, that first time, it really kind of solidified. When you work with an artist, depending on the artist, the collaboration, you never kind of know what you're going to get, and if you're going to like hit a vein per se, as far as like hitting gold. And I definitely felt like I did that with Daryl. He's a wonderful artist. He responds. He has great feedback as far as the script, mentioning any possible edits that will help make the comic succeed even more. And yeah, just all around, he's a complete pro at what he does. And I honestly, I feel like he's a little undervalued in the comics world at the moment, but I'm positive he's gonna really break through and become a household name, at least in the comics world.
How did you find each other?
I think it started off, I was pretty active on Tumblr, and I think I saw some of his art reblogged on that website, and I just kind of keep a mental file of artists I like and track it, as well as obviously follow them and such. But in this instance, the second comic that I came out with Daryl, he wasn't the first artist that was attached to it. I had another artist lined up, and that was a bit of a problem collaboration where I'd worked with the artist, and unfortunately, because of problems that were kind of out of my own control, I commissioned that, and it seemed like it kind of just dragged its feet for over a year. The only real artwork I received back from the artist was just character designs, and it was sadly a comic I really, really wanted to get out there and put into the world. And finally we came to a mutual agreement that the collaboration wasn't working out, and it was best to go our separate ways. So it was a mutual agreement, and I was more than happy, because at that point I was like, I just need to get this comic. I need to get this comic going. And the first person on my radar was Daryl. He seemed like he was pretty professional. I had bought a comic from my friend Luke, who wrote one with him called Outer God. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a pretty, I think it's like 150 pages or so, but it's completely independently created. Luke created this book that I think he pitched to several publishers, and unfortunately, a couple people bid at it, but it didn't make it through. So he decided, well, what the hell? I've already got all the issues done. So he collected his 5 issues. I think he sold some digitally, and then he just eventually printed out the book. And I managed to grab one of those, and I was really happy that I did, because I got to see Daryl's talents as far as creating atmosphere, different character expressions. One thing I particularly look for in artists is, you can see a lot of comic artists out there, at least quote unquote comic artists, create wonderful visual pinups. But the thing that I really look for as a writer is sequential art. If they can't tell a story within the manner of just comics in general, then unfortunately I just have to pass on them, because breaking down from panel to panel to panel to panel is really what comics are all about. It's not just one art illustration, and a lot of illustrators think that they could do comics, unfortunately. So being able to see Daryl complete a 150 page book was really astounding, and I knew that this guy was probably my best bet. So having read that comic first, then getting to work on The Games We Played with such a short 16-page comic, and then moving into Nico's Fortune, which was about 40 pages, maybe a little less. And then I knew, hey, this is collaboration that's perfect. We slowly became friends over time too. So now we chat about, what horror movies have you watched lately? And what board games are you playing? What comics are you reading? I was actually lucky enough to table at TCAF a couple of weeks ago, which that's the Toronto Comics Arts Festival in Toronto. And I was sitting next to Tyler Crook, who illustrates Harrow County, and I told Daryl, and he said, "Oh my gosh, can you give me a sign? Can you give me a signed copy of the latest Harrow County?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. It's fine." So yeah, we're just I think we're both a couple of horror nerds at this point, and just love the spooky books.
What?
And it's great working with
awesome
one another.
To, like, find that, it's like you found your buddy kind of thing, and like, he's
totally.
halfway around the world, but like you're through the magic of the internet, you're able to not only meet and share the stuff that you like, but also the make something, make comics, which is pretty great.
Oh yeah. 100%.
What is it about horror that's drawn you to the genre? That's something that not only that you're enjoying, but something that you want to tell your own kind of stories in.
I've always loved horror. As far back as I could remember, to be honest. I wasn't really into the bloody gore, visceral stuff, which I'm still hardly into. I've grown into a Clive Barker fan, but I was never. I know some friends that loved Hellraiser, honestly, like from the age of 8, and that just wasn't for me. But one of the first movie experiences I remember was going to see Creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't know why my mom thought it was a great idea, but she took my brother and I to a 3D screening of The Creature, and it just blew my little mind. I must have either been in kindergarten, maybe younger, I'm not sure, but I don't know. There was something about that experience of seeing the Gill Man up on the screen that really reached its claws into me, and I've never managed to shake it. So yeah, since it's like I remember dressing up as all the Universal monsters ever since kindergarten forward. It was first The Creature, and then Dracula, and then Wolfman, and then just go down the list all the way through.
It's pretty amazing how influential those movies are, even to like this day. That they hold up, and they're still like I've talked to so many people that cite that as whether they saw it on like some weird creature feature at a local cinema, or they saw it late night movies or something like that. But it is incredible that like it stood so much of the test of time that everyone still cites it as a definite influence.
I think it didn't hurt too. I don't know when I was first influenced or was first shown the movie, but Monster Squad, that one definitely hit home. It was like basically combining Goonies with Universal Monsters, and that's exactly what I needed as a kid. Is just I want horror and I want kids having fun, but also being spooked at the same time. And yeah, I don't know. It took me a long time to track that movie on VHS, but God, whenever it came on TV or something, I was always there, just glued to the screen. Yeah, and I don't know, horror's always been an attraction in so many ways. I remember going to the old Blockbuster, and there being the kind of designated horror section that was off to the side. It was like in a little separate room where, you kind of felt like a little naughty going inside, almost like it was some porno room or something. But it was like you just go inside and you see all these, I don't know, horror movies and all these crazy lurid VHS covers that were just, men in monster suits or people just terrified and shrieking, and you never knew what you're going to get. And of course, half these movies are pure crap, but that was kind of the fun with it, is just running the gamut. And then I think also just growing up in the 90s with like I was born in 88, but growing up around that time with, I have a brother who's 6 years younger than me. So I kind of inherited a lot of his toys, as well as just, what he was influenced by popular culture wise. So he kind of tuned me into a lot of like what was going on. But, I remember collecting all like the trading cards and stuff. And there's so many different ones that are like monster inspired. The one that really left an impression on me was, I think 7-Eleven offered these free promo cards. I don't know, buy a Slurpee, you get like a pack of cards, but they're called Monsters in My Pocket.
That was like a, I think that was like a toy. It was like obviously before like Pokemon or something like that, but like it was,
Yep. Yeah, you're right. So I think it was like something like, I don't know, 32 monsters or something like that. But you're right. There were these little toys, kind of like the little rubber wrestler guys that were in the 80s, and they came out with these monster versions. And I think they kind of worked like, rock, paper, scissors, or they had some point value or something. So, kind of like a precursor to Pokemon. But they developed these trading cards along with them too. And they had some of the most lavish pictures on them, wonderful illustrations. And then for any monster fan, creature feature horror fan, you had this wonderful description on the back. So I think I was like, not old enough to actually be able to read them, but it was one of those things where, you know, you ask your mom, like, hey, could you read this to me? Oh, where's this monster from? Oh, it's really exciting. So yeah, that definitely solidified, I was that weirdo kid who just couldn't get enough of monsters.
I mean, I think people don't give, like, the 90s trading card industry the credit it deserves, because, like, that was one of my gateways into comics in general, were, like, the Marvel comic cards of that era.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like, I feel like I learned more about, you know, like, you know, great battles in the Marvel universe and stuff from those cards than I did from actually, like, reading comics. And all of a sudden I became, like, this, like, mini little expert on Marvel comics just because I had a shitload of those cards.
You know, I'm actually the same way. I had those Marvel cards. I had some of the DC ones, and I wasn't a Marvel reader. I wasn't a DC reader much at all, and I'm still not. But I know most of the characters thanks to those cards. Yeah, it's very odd because they had the Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, and yeah, my brother and I collected them all, and it's kind of odd when you think of it that way.
Yeah, but, I mean, we don't have that kind of, like, this is going to make me sound, like, old and nostalgic, but, like, between that kind of entry point into comics, as well as, you know, the entry point that you mentioned in, like, the video store for horror, like, those are two things that are just completely gone now. Like, yeah, there are trading cards, but, like, they're not as like as prevalent as they once were. And obviously, you know, the you know, video store is basically a thing of the past by this point. Yeah, you have Netflix, you could browse around there, but there is something to be said for, like, walking through that, like you said, like, you never know what you're gonna get with that kind of scenario. You're kind of like walking in there and you're like, this looks interesting, but, like, I'm gonna roll the dice and see what happens. And you're more likely to see it through because, like, yeah, I paid $3 or whatever to get this rental, whereas, like, Netflix, if I don't like it within 5 minutes, I could turn it off and go watch, you know, an episode of The Office for the millionth time.
Right. And I think, like, the trading cards, too, were the first way I was introduced to Fangoria. I remember Fangoria had a line of trading cards, and just being appalled by the horrid pictures that were on the covers. I mean, stuff, you know, a little kid like me, like, should not have been looking at, but it was just, like, so gruesome, yet it was there. And, yeah, it's stuff like that. And I think they had the silly, like, baseball ones that were kind of knockoffs of Garbage Pail Kids and whatnot, and they just had everything. And yeah, it's fascinating to think about it now.
It being exposed to horror at a young age seems to be a pretty ongoing theme, and it's funny because, like, you think of, like I obviously, like, wouldn't show my kid Hellraiser right now, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I definitely watched these, like, a lot of, like, Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that at way too young of an age, and then it obviously left an impression on me, but to the extent where I'm, like, fascinated by the genre and not that I'm, like, you know, terrified and having nightmares and stuff. Like, obviously everyone's different, but I feel like there's a way to get, like, obviously you can get into anything at any age, but there's something, like, special about that time where it's like, I'm a young, impressionable kid, and I'm going to see something that I know is going to freak me out, and I probably shouldn't be watching this, but that kind of excitement helps fuel it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just being excited to see something that you shouldn't, or at least it seems like you shouldn't, between how much violence or, say, the possibility of nudity that's out there, or just, I don't know, the crazy lurid creature that's going to, you know, pop into your nightmares later. I think that was the big thing for me, is just, what's this monster going to look like? Am I going to be scared? And I don't know. As a child, I was pretty impressionable to the point of being terrified and having nightmares. I think I was, like, afraid of the leprechaun living underneath my bed, you know, the Warwick Davis one, and I don't know why I think it back on that now.
When you're a kid, it sounds like creepy, and like, obviously, if you look back on, like, Leprechaun in the Hood wasn't the scary one, but, like, that wasn't the one you saw first, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, just thinking about it, just being that kind of thrill factor, like going on a roller coaster and something, and you're always kind of looking for like, what's next, what's out there. But then at the same time, I've always had that attraction to monsters that's just kind of fascinating and something I wanted to know a little bit more about, and just want to kind of believe it's real in a way. Yeah, I've never really kind of given that up, and I suppose, you know, coming into comic books and wanting to write those, and I as I was a teenager, I grew more into, like, literary fiction as far as like Ray Bradbury and obviously got into my Stephen King kick and whatnot, and that just kind of solidified the idea that, yeah, you know, horror has a potential in a literary capacity, and it's possible to tell these stories and kind of have like a bit of more of an impact and create some well-defined, developed characters. And I can't seem to shake it for some reason. It's very odd.
You get that itch, and then that's what happens. So
yeah,
so
it's true.
Is this this is your third comic, right? Like you mentioned the other ones, the one before, then Nico's Fortune. Sorry, I blanked on the name of the first one.
The first one was The Games We Played. So these are the most long format comics I've done. I've done several short story comics, and I seem to kind of always get roped into some anthology, which is a good thing, because I think it tends to kind of stretch and exercise your muscles, which I think as a writer you kind of need. I think the first comic I did was just an adaptation of a poem that I wrote. So it was very much kind of like a literary graphic kind of experimental piece. And then one after that, I think I was pitching to an anthology. It's a comic called Totally Aces, which is it's an anthropomorphic tale of asexuality told with anthropomorphic characters. And so it's very specific and unique. It kind of has this cult following behind it, which is really cool and fascinating. Whenever I table at conventions and stuff, I get a lot of fans that kind of appear out of the woodworks. I'm like, how the hell did you hear about this comic? But it's kind of funny, because when I'm tabling, I have that comic, which has this kind of cutesy pink cover to it, and it's charming and it's funny. And then I have my ghost story comic and my kind of campy 80s horror Nico's Fortune, and then I have this crime thriller Cricketsong over on the other side, and it's just it's like I don't know, I want to dabble in all the genres.
So next is romantic comedy, and then western, I guess, is
I think one of the shorts I did for an anthology was I think it was actually a couple of the last ones were autobiographical in a sense. One was it was for the Built on Strange Grounds anthology, which is kind of talking about haunted or paranormal locations within North America that just had something odd going around them. And one tale I wanted to tell was about the Zodiac Shack, which is kind of like an urban legend in my hometown of Vacaville. And one thing about that was like the Zodiac killer used this shack to murder his victims, and that was the location. And so I kind of wanted to unravel that mystery, because I'd read Robert Graysmith's book, and I knew that story was completely bunk. So I was like, okay, there's got to be some kernel of knowledge here. So I decided to delve a little deeper, especially into the Zodiac Killer and what he was about. And it was kind of interesting, because my dad actually went to school with the first victim of the Zodiac Killer. So I got to kind of backtrack and go to that location outside of Benicia and kind of investigate a bit on my own. And it was very creepy. It was very interesting. But it was the first time I actually got to dabble in kind of like an autobio crime comic tale. Then from there, another one that I did was in the Corpus anthology, which one of my parents actually suffers from hoarding disorder, and it's something that I've had to struggle with in my own life as well as some of my siblings' life, and it just seems to reoccur in so many ways. So getting to tell that tale was kind of refreshing too. So I don't know, getting to stretch those creative muscles is just wonderful, especially in comics. There's just unlimited potential as far as what type of stories you could tell, not just horror. You could tell damn near anything.
And you really hit on a great point with the anthologies, because like it's a great, if you're just starting out, that's the way to go to get your name out there to an extent, but also like to get actual work done. Like no one's gonna sit there and be like, yeah, I have the 60-page epic or 60-issue epic I want to do. It's like, yeah, that's cool, but like you're asking an artist to give up 60 months worth of their life, 5 years or so worth of their lives to do that. Yeah, they're not gonna be rushing to do that, man. They have no idea who you are.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most common mistakes for most young creators is, all right, I gotta have my Watchmen epic, or I gotta do my version of Black Hole or Nausicaa or Akira, some big grand scale scheme comic that's gonna take half their life. And oh god, I did that myself, and I quickly abandoned that project and was like, okay, let's just think of this as fan fiction or maybe something I'll come back to. But half of my friends in comics have that story.
I guess it depends on how successful you are is when you realize that in your career, that like this is the way to go to kind of start everything out. Start small and build your way up.
Oh yeah, I mean cutting your chops on anthology seems like the best way to go. You just learn the pacing for comics. I mean, I think the first script that I wrote, I passed it along to another comic writer to just kind of, get his feelers on it and see if I was doing it correctly or not. And I think, God, and it's like one amount of dialogue alone was like something like 60 words, or hell, it might have been 80 or something like that. And he's like, you might kind of want to tone things down, and maybe rather than have like 6 speech bubbles per panel, maybe, give it on average like 1 or 2, 3 might be pushing it. So
the thing about it is, you don't get paid by the word, so don't worry about that. Maybe just less is more in those kind of situations.
Yeah, this was definitely in my phase of, admiring everything and anything of Alan Moore. I was like, oh my God, you could have a page with 9 panels on it.
Yeah, you
3
could.
speech bubbles.
It doesn't mean that it's a good idea.
Exactly. You got to know your limits. I feel like if that's your aspiration to be Alan Moore, you got to work up to it. And I don't know, my number one rule in comics is do not be Alan Moore. You're not Alan Moore. You are who you are. Be that person.
Now, what has your experience been with Kickstarter so far? So this isn't the first time you're using the platform. You're back on it with Cricketsong now. So like good, bad, and different. Right. Like what are your feelings on the platform?
So far it's been extremely positive. The first time around, it was very warm reviews, receptions as far as the launch of Nico's Fortune. That was the first comic that I launched on there. I think it did help having a comic that was something extremely easily marketable, for the fact that it was a queer-friendly horror comic about 2 newlyweds. They move in a home with a cat, so you have a cat in there too, and that's definitely a very popular item on the internet. And then you just feel like combining the fact that it was queer-friendly horror as well as there's a cat as one of the characters was very attractive to a lot of people. And yeah, we funded the comic pretty quickly on the first turnaround. I wasn't really worried about how it was going to go whatsoever. This time around, it's been a bit more difficult, and I think it's just because this is a different type of comic. It's a crime thriller. There's both of my characters are kind of antagonists in a way. They're not really kind of people that you could root for. The thing that I really want to shine in this comic is just Daryl's art. He's done a fantastic job as far as setting atmosphere, getting the mood right for the Southern California desert. It's really a bit of a character piece, and unfortunately it's kind of one of those comics you have to read to really truly appreciate. So I'm just kind of hoping the audience will kind of understand that. And I mean, it's kind of tough as far as Kickstarter goes, because you don't get a lot of your funding till it's either the first week or really the last leg of it, and you just never know what that's going to be like. And I've been a part of some Kickstarters. I think all 3 of the anthologies that I've appeared in last were all Kickstarter funded. And most of them, I think maybe other than one was funded pretty quickly, but the other 2 kind of like dragged to the very end. And it was just kind of anybody's game as far as would they make their goal? Would it not? The last anthology I was a part of was called Planetside. And it was kind of a speculative science fiction set on kind of like a, common quotidian type storytelling. So slice of life sci-fi. And I think we were like $12,000 or $13,000 away from our goal within the span of like 3 or 4 days left. And somehow we made it. And I'm still just completely like in utter disbelief at the fact that so many people just popped out of the woodworks to fund this comic. I thought that we had, a snowflake's chance in hell. It was very surprising. So, I don't know. Kickstarter is really cool. I love it. I love the fact that indie creators could get their works out there in the world. The one thing that I do like to stress the most about my Kickstarter campaigns is the book is done. It's 100% complete. All the artwork is done. The lettering is done. All I really need are the funds to send out for the complete print run, and then boom, everybody who pledges to the Kickstarter will receive the reward. And that was the beautiful thing about the Nico's Fortune Kickstarter is I managed to get all the pledges out there. And the only negative influence I've had with Kickstarters is just whether or not the creator manages to get the product into the hands of the backers. And I think there's still one that I pledged from, it was like 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm still getting updates like every other week as to like, oh, what's the progress? And, there's some years where it's like you don't hear anything from the creator, and that's not the type of person I want to be. I'd prefer the comic to be completely done. This is it. You're basically pre-ordering the book. Once the Kickstarter ends and we succeed, you get the book, whether it's digital, physical copy, whatever.
I think that's certainly the way to go. Because I went through this phase where I backed like a ridiculous amount of Kickstarters, so much so that I went to look up Nico's Fortune because I know I backed that Kickstarter campaign, and I'm like, I can't find this book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm a digital backer, so like I had everything, and then like I had a hard drive crash at one point, so I was going through and I was like, I know I have, and I'm not saying that to like fish for it. I'm just like, I know I have this somewhere. I went through all my like folders and files, and I was like, I have no idea where it is. Like,
I have had people reach out to me and they say, hey, I moved or something happened. I said, yeah, it's easy. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Cause I mean, if you pledge for it once, I've got your name on a list somewhere.
It's easy to check that.
It's not really going to hurt me. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Kickstarter is it's really well organized. It's a clean website. It's pretty well structured. I feel like at this point, I believe on their website it says that they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary, so that's really cool. Unfortunately, I think like there's still some family members of mine that are like, Kickstarter, what's that? What's this concept? And you kind of have to explain it a little bit. And I think the best thing to do is create a video that kind of gives them kind of a tutorial as to what your goal is, what your expectations are, what you're providing the person, how to kind of help out, and basically do the math for the person.
Yeah, I think when you kind of like put it in there for like, black and white, it's a little bit easier. But it is interesting that like as big as I think Kickstarter is, and they're celebrating their 10 years, there are still people that have no earthly idea what that is or how it works and everything like that. So it's not as big as I thought it was when I first started backing stuff on Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, it's weird how there's that internet bubble where you discover something and you're like, oh my god, I'm the last person on this list, yet you're like the lowest margin aware in the world.
Yeah, so I mean, what have you done differently with Cricketsong's Kickstarter campaign than you did for Nico's Fortune?
Let's see. I mean, the benefit with Cricketsong is I do have other books that I could help push my goal along. Like I'm including as other rewards, say, the games we played as well as Nico's Fortune, which is nice. I do think there's a larger audience as far as people that have backed my previous comic that are also helping us out here, helping us spread the word. Luckily getting to table, I had the opportunity to table at TCAF as well as VanCAF, which is the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival. I got the chance to kind of see some faces that had previously funded Nico's Fortune, so they were excited about the campaign, and they're like, all right, I'll pledge, I won't buy like an early copy or anything like that. So that was very exciting. I think going through doing the math, it seems like the costs have risen a bit. I mean, the book for Cricketsong is, I think 4 extra pages in comparison to Nico's. It's a little bit longer. And unfortunately, that just bumps up the cost by just, a marginal amount. And then I think Kickstarter might be taking more fees than they did 2 years ago when I first funded Nico's. So you just have to always do your math and make sure everything looks right. And, I've seen some Kickstarter campaigns where I'm like, oh gosh, that's a really expensive, or really high goal. I don't know if they're going to make that. But once you kind of do your own Kickstarter and you kind of do the math, you're like, you start to think like, that sounds right. Okay. Yeah. That extremely high goal. And unfortunately that's actually necessary sometimes. So,
well, I think, comics is uniquely suited in that, like, it doesn't cost that much money to make a comic in the scheme of things. Like, I've looked at some film Kickstarters and it's like, hi, I've never made a movie before. I need $250,000. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. And then it's like, if you want a digital copy of the movie, that'll cost $75. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want, this sounds like way far off. Like, and then you look at, you look at a comic, like, all right, it's $5 for the digital copy. Done. Yeah. I'll easily throw that down. Yeah. Is it a little more than like what you'd pay at a convention if you were to just pick up a book? Yeah. But knowing that it's like, all right, I'll gladly pay a little bit extra, just to help this thing get made. Well,
most of the time I'm happy to help an independent creator. I think those those one moments on Kickstarter that kind of, ruffle my feathers is when I see some kind of big Hollywood auteur that for a fact, like they could really get funding for this if they really wanted to. I think the one example that I have kind of etched into my mind is for Dan Harmon and I think Charlie Kaufman's Anomalisa, which I was like, oh, this sounds like a wonderful idea, and I'd love to help it, but I'm like, these are two fantastic creators. You can't tell me like they're not finding the funding for this. And it was like I think it was like the DVD copy was like $40 or something like that, and I was like, that seems so outrageous for me at the time. And of course, it becomes like a big Academy Award nominated film, and like there's probably copies in like Target now for like $5 or something like that. And I just feel bad for those folks that first funded it. I guess you get on the ground floor and you're kind of one of those people that's like, hey, I helped make this movie, and there's kind of pride in that in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, like that, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, there is a place for that. And I guess the argument can be made for those kind of creators is that like, hey, this is someone, they want to do it their way, and if they go through and do it through like a studio, it's not going to be their vision or whatever like that. So if you like our stuff, do this. But like, it does feel sometimes like if they went to that well every single time, it would be one thing. But like, it seems like it's chosen like very sparingly.
And I think that is the thing with, why I've actually used Kickstarter the past couple times is I do want to keep that creative control. There are definitely certain publishers that you could go with as far as, say, I don't know, Image Comics, where you're retaining all your creative rights. But at the end of the day, this comic, once it gets funded, any money that's coming in, which honestly I'm eating most of the cost as it is, but it would be going to myself and Daryl. We are the two creators for this comic. It's not going to any publisher. I am the active publisher on this. It's basically going to fund the book. There's no kind of, group of people in suits standing behind us, holding their palms out, waiting for their amount of cash. So yeah, fortunately it's basically from person funder to the creator directly. So that's really nice. Yeah, getting to be able to have that creative control is definitely it definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the beauty of that platform too, is just kind of bringing the creator directly to the consumer. So, well, look, I backed the Kickstarter myself now, so we'll definitely, I put my money where my mouth is on the show, so trying to make sure
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're all in the, you back this one with confidence and get out there. The fact that you have the book made is a huge difference. That's a huge selling point, I think. Aside from the Kickstarter, which we'll link in the show notes for this episode, where are the best places to find you online?
Oh, the best places, you could go to my website. It's ryanKingWrites.com. I'm also very active on Twitter, as well as I am on Tumblr, but Tumblr's kind of gone to the wayside at the moment. But I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. I'm not super active on there, but generally Instagram and Twitter under it's Ryan with 3 Y's, and then Ryan_King with 3 I's, but I'm sure if you just looked up Ryan King Comics, you'll find me immediately.
Cool. All right, guys. So there's still plenty of time to back the Kickstarter if you're hearing this and right after it comes out. So head on over there and check it out. But otherwise, anything else you want to leave folks with about Cricketsong?
Oh yeah, I just hope you guys find the project entertaining. Drop me a line if you have any questions whatsoever. I'm pretty active. This is actually going to go a long ways as far as getting the next book going. So anything that you help us out with here is going to help future comic projects, whether it's with Daryl Toh and I or a future comic collaborator. Basically, my goal is to slowly and steadily get to larger and bigger projects. So I feel like it started off with the small 4 or 5 pager comic to that 16 pager with Daryl, and next the 40 pager. This one's a 44. The next one that I have planned after this is something like 50 or in the 60 page bracket. And then I'm really hoping to start going for a mini series and, possibly make it with some publishers, get some publishers interested. And then I might not have to go with Kickstarter anymore. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, well, depends on those contracts.
You're doing it right in terms of, increasing over time. So you have that track record behind you. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing to do, and most creators out there who are interested should go that route too.
Yeah. Cool. All right. That has been this episode of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Ryan King. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorDNA.com. We have been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. If you like the show, please help me out by leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. I am always looking for new guests, so if you have a horror comic, I want to hear from you. I don't care if you're a seasoned pro or a first-timer. You can find me on Twitter as @JamesFerguson or via email at james@horrordna.com. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and so much more. Check us out at HorrorDNA.com and @HorrorDNA on Twitter.